Welcome to the State Journal's Decision Makers. Join us as leaders from across West Virginia gather to discuss what's working and what needs to be improved. State Journal's Decision Makers. And now the State Journal's Decision Makers, helping to improve the quality of life in your town and your state for a better future. The State Journal's Decision Makers is brought to you by the Center for Rural Health Development Incorporated, the Cook Company, Fox Engineering, Fox Construction, Coventry Healthcare, and Thrasher Engineering.
Good morning and welcome to the State Journal's Decision Makers. We've got a lot for you on this Super Bowl Sunday. We'll talk with Governor Tomlin's Chief of Staff, Rob Alsop, and find out where West Virginia is in its fight to land the game-changing cracker plant. Our State Journal political experts Beth Gorsica-Ryan and Ann Eli will be with us later in the show. And in just a minute, U.S. Attorney Booth Goodwin will speak to the ongoing federal investigation into what appears to be a never-ending voter fraud case in Lincoln County. But right now, the lady that led the charge to clean up Lincoln County, Natalie Tennant, thank you for being with us, Secretary of State for West Virginia. You know, it seems like 4 years has gone by in a hurry, huh? I
know. I think about that too, especially as we had folks coming in and filing to run for office. Are you up already? Well, yeah, I am, and I guess so am I. Although I've been in office for 3 years. You know, this is the election year, and I have another year in office, but right. It's also an election year at the same time.
So let me ask you, I hadn't even thought of this as you were saying. So how does the Secretary of State go about filing to run for office? Do you just like get your computer out and turn it on?
No, I did it by the books too. I wanted to be the first one to file for office, but when I had walked in even early, someone was there earlier, Larry Williams, a delegate from Preston County, and so he and I were one of the first together because I wanted to be one of the first to file, because I then wanted to go on to continue my job to get everyone else filed as well. So that's the way it took place. I didn't have a huge announcement. I sent out a press release to tell folks that I was indeed asking for the opportunity to be Secretary of State again. So I sent that out and then filed.
Were there any like last minute surprises that, you know, where people waited till midnight on Saturday to mail it in or something?
Actually, that's a good question, because I'm not sure that the surprise came at midnight on that Saturday, which we wanted. You know, we had a webcast up the whole 3 weeks that there was a filing, because transparency, there's nothing more transparent than having a camera right on your office. I think some of the surprises might have come during the mailing. We received about 89 mail-in certificate of announcements on Monday, and the one I think that surprised me was Delegate Rick Snuffer. He'd run a couple times against Nick Joe Rahal, right, and he has tried it again. He's giving up his delegate seat. I work with him in the legislature, and I just thought that was interesting. He's a first-time delegate and going to try it again against Rahal.
And people don't realize that a lot of times if you're in one political office, depending on the length of term, you've got to give up your job go after another one.
That's right.
Well, let me ask you, let's talk about Lincoln County. That seems like the just never-ending political corruption down there. Where are we? You guys, when we had you on statewide on Monday night, you and Booth Goodwin talked about the continuing investigation. I speculated that it might be County Commissioner Thomas Ramey. Where are you all in any ongoing? Are there going to be, and I know one of your investigators has really helped the feds, according to both you and to Booth Goodwin, are there going to be more indictments or pleas?
I'm going to allow Booth to talk a little bit more about the investigation aspect, because I'm able to talk about this because it has, in the cooperation that we had, it's a federal investigation, right, which brings stiffer charges, federal felonies where we have state misdemeanors unless it's an extreme case. And so he can talk a little bit more about the investigation, and we continue to do what we do with much of the groundwork as we did and on the scene even before that May 2010 election. We were on the scene there in April, but when we started hearing things and people giving calls to us. And so we will continue that. We'll continue with that collaboration, and I think that that's what shows the importance of all of this, of how state and federal can work together. And you made the statement up on at the top and saying, you know, an ongoing, a continuing. Well, I think that you're seeing, and I'll tout us a little bit. You have a different group of leaders when you're looking at Natalie Tennant, when you're looking at Booth Goodwin or Steve Ruby, with assistance from a Jim Wise and the investigators and the attorneys that we have in the Secretary of State's office. I can talk all I want, and I know that you all are tired of me thinking that it's political speak, saying we do our job, but now we've shown the action. Actions, yes indeed, do speak louder than words, and this is where it's a new day. It's a new opportunity for folks to see we're not going to take this anymore. I am serious about the work that we do, and you probably have not seen this from a Secretary of State before, but here I am.
And Natalie, here's what's so interesting, and I think you just sort of hit it right on the head. After you and Booth Goodwin were on our special edition Monday night, we had emails from viewers in Lincoln County that said, we live here. We really want this cleaned up. We want to have an open government. We want to have an honest government. But there's a group of people that have control of our government, and we can't get it back. And they're really frustrated, I think.
Well, and I can understand that frustration too, because I have the same frustration of seeing people whittle away. It is not okay to chip away at democracy, not when we see folks from the Secretary of State's office or from the U.S. Attorney's office doing the work and putting ourselves and our reputation on the line. But it goes farther than that. It goes to the men and women who are out sacrificing right now away from their families. People like my husband, Eric Wells. I will not allow that to take place. And so what we need as far as our duties, we need to work hand in hand with the people who are on the front lines, who have that fear. And perhaps they see in us now that we take it seriously, and that's how we move forward. Because I believe you asked me that on Monday. Where do we go to from now? Well, if you call, you know you're going to get a response from the Secretary of State's office. We're going to do education, we're going to do training, we're going to continue to be down there as we have been through every election.
Okay, now, one of the things that has drawn the attention of our state journals, Jim Ross, who's quite a man with numbers and a great reporter, he did a couple stories during this last summer about Lincoln County's voter registration and the fact that while the U.S. Census suggests that they have 16,790 18-plus citizens, that at that time they had 19,505 registered voters, which is 116%. And through efforts that I know you don't control the registration in any county, you all monitor it and you oversee it.
That's right.
But even after they, quote, purged the records, they took 386 off, which brought them down to 18,974 or 113%. And logic would tell me that that creates room for shenanigans when you got more registered voters than you do people living there.
Right. Those numbers are not acceptable. We all agree, and I believe that the county clerk's office, those folks who work in the county clerk's office there, would not think they're acceptable, and county clerks throughout the state don't think they're acceptable. And you see that they're working to purge, and we're in that phase right now. And what we continue to do from the Secretary of State standpoint, we know that we have technology that can help make this more audible. We are working with, whether it's the Pew Center, whether it's with other Secretaries of States, the National Association of Secretaries of State, to work and find ways that we're better able to purge those numbers. And it can be as simple too as, and not making excuses, but you have a woman who might be married 1 or 2 times who has different names and never was really taken off the voter list from one county to the next. So we work on that. We also have some legislation put forward in this legislative session to clarify who does have that authority. And we talked about this this summer, and we are asking that the Secretary of State does have that authority to say to a county, let's see how you've cleaned up these voter rolls. You know, here's a perfect, for instance, the county clerk has to certify that they've started the purging efforts, but they don't have to certify that they finished it. So right there is simple change in code that will give some authority and accountability to all of this, because I agree with you. We have to be accountable for these numbers.
Well, let me ask you, how do you feel about voter IDs? I mean, I think most people believe that that's really appropriate. You go in, you show a driver, some kind of identification that it's really you. Right now, you can't do that, or you don't do that. You just pop in there and say you're Joe Cool, and,
well,
and you get to vote.
we do have forms of security and ID, and if you're a first-time voter who may have, well, when you first register, you have to show your ID when you sign your signature. You also have to show, maybe perhaps you mailed in your voter registration. You have to show it for the first time, some type of identification.
But do you think we should show it when we vote?
Well, what the security aspect is that we have is you sign your signature and it has to match. And I know that there's some legislation that just a couple days ago is coming through the legislature, and it is calling for the same mechanism to be able to match up someone's signature with a photo. They want to have the photo ID, but the ultimate is the signature, which we already do for those security measures. You know, my charge as the chief elections officer is to make it accessible. I don't want, and I've talked to senior centers and had debates in senior centers in Hinton, in your hometown, and they said, well, some woman said, well, yeah, we should have it. And I said, well, how are you going to go get that? When they've moved the DMV, or they don't have the accessibility to a picture, it's seniors, it's folks who might not have vehicles to be able to drive, and I don't believe that we put unrealistic restrictions on folks.
So
they have to be able to vote.
You would not be in favor of a
not at this point, and I'll see what this legislation does. I want to be able to see if it's really changing anything that we already do, and on the blush of it, when it's saying to match up signature anyway, we already do that. We have that security measure.
All right, I had 28 other questions.
That's okay. Let's go for it.
Town, but I did one question I would like to get here in the last minute. How do you feel about this project in Morgantown where people voted by mail? What's your that seems to me, in everything that's happening, to be one way that could really be abused. What is your experience?
Well, we've had that. We've had that pilot project, and it just wasn't Morgantown. There were two phases of a pilot project, and remember, it was the city council from Morgantown that came down and said, we have to find ways to save money. We have to find ways to increase voter turnout, and we were able to do that with this vote by mail pilot project that they instituted. Didn't save as much money as I would like to save, but we're going to be able to do that in the second phase of it. And they had increased voter turnout. And smaller cities as well used it, like Harrisville, Bethany, and the Northern
Do you think
Panhandle.
it is more susceptible to fraud?
I think that you have the same mechanisms that we have for the security measures with the signatures. And you see the whole state of Oregon, actually the whole state of Washington State is.
But do you all send those out to every registered voter?
They did, yes.
So if you had, if they were doing that in Lincoln County, they'd send out 116% of the ballots, right? In theory.
Perhaps.
Okay. All right. Well, we are going to definitely have you back on before the election just to sort of talk more about the mechanics of voting and voter fraud. But again, thank you for what you and your office have done to help bring attention to some of the
well, and I just ask the honest voters who are out there to continue to have the dialogue with us and keep the cooperation going, because that's how we're able to do our job, by knowing what's going on the front lines as well.
All right, well, thank you. And last week we had your husband Eric on, Senator Wells, and we know he had surgery. How's he doing?
His back is doing well. He's just keeping it nice, propped up and in a restful position.
All right.
Thank you,
Natalie Tennant.
Thank you.
Booth Goodwin will be with us in just a moment.